All right. So, well, thank you for having me so I can share one of my passions, which are tiny dolls. And one of the main things we'll talk about today, almost all of the dolls, with a couple of exceptions, will be about 6 inches and under. And we're going to talk from everything from antique dolls all the way up to modern dolls from our current time period. And we'll go through it's more of an appreciation tonight. We're going to go through looking at some of the antique dolls because they're very indecipherable for people who are not familiar with the small antique and like ways you can look at them and think about them, and going all the way up into the more modern dolls of the 20th century and the 21st century, ways to collect, ways to think about them. And it's very different than a large doll. So I'm just going to start right in. There we go. So I wanted the oldest play doll that we know about is actually a tiny doll. And people for years said that the oldest doll were the dolls that were found in Egypt. But the problem with the dolls found in Egypt is we didn't know whether or not they were play dolls. They usually had fertility symbols, and it wasn't clear. But I think within the last 10 years in Siberia, they found a Bronze Age grave site of a child, and it had playthings with it, including this tiny doll, which, as you can see, fits in the palm of a hand, and it was made of soapstone. So tiny dolls have been popular, since the beginning of dolls, because of their accessibility. You don't need a lot of materials to make them, and just kind of there's something that really attaches us to something that is miniaturized, be it miniaturized humans, furniture, etc. So again, so many tiny dolls. This is a group of just tiny dolls that of the antique type. And here you're seeing a mix from Germany and from France, different values, different reasons they were made. And this big girl in the back, she's 8 inches. She's like giant in the world of tiny dolls. And like, why did I start collecting tiny dolls? So it's a bit of an interesting story. I was a miniaturist before I was a doll collector, so that kind of makes sense. I fell in love with miniatures, and I was in miniature clubs, and I was attached to doll houses. And I started to get into dolls kind of simultaneously. My first love was vintage Barbie, which has a lot of miniaturization in it when you think about the accessories and the clothing. But for miniature dolls, I had fallen in love with miniatures at a miniature show. I met Evelyn Ackerman, who wrote the book Dolls in Miniature. And I started talking, and we became friends, got the book signed. One thing led to another, and I ended up making tiny dolls. And so the dolls to the right are dolls that I was doing miniature shows and selling dolls that I made from hand. Those are all from scratch. I did use someone's mold, but I made the bisque, I painted them, I did the clothing. So I've had an appreciation for tiny dolls since the early 1990s, and that's how I got started. And I miniaturized even like little miniature ribbon work, just something I've been fascinated in. Many years later, I ended up, after Evelyn had passed, I went to the auction of her dolls and was very, very blessed to get some dolls from her collection that had appeared in the book that actually had got me started. And that was really quite a wonderful thing. Okay, Alexa, how do we approach miniature dolls? Large dolls, there you go. You've got a giant Jameau, you've got a Patty Play Pal. It's a big object. It makes a statement in a room or in a collection. But how do we approach miniature dolls as forming a collection and also displaying and thinking about them? And so I categorize things, and there's many ways you can look at it or start a collection. I mean, you can start a general collection just loving tiny. But you can organize your collection by material. You can do it by body type if you're into antiques, such as all bisque or a wood doll or cloth dolls. You can look at when they were manufactured. Perhaps your only interest is antique dolls. Perhaps you like early 20th century and the early dollhouse dolls. Perhaps you're a modern doll collector and you like ball jointed dolls. And so it can be based on time period. If you're an antique collector and you're into all bisques, you can look at something as particular as the type of shoe, which is a really kind of big thing. And you can look at intended use. Were the dolls made for doll houses? Were they play dolls? Were they made for sewing, like La Poupée Model? So that's a way to categorize. And you can also categorize by country of origin. Perhaps you like Japanese dolls. There are a lot of fascinating tiny Japanese dolls. Perhaps you, again, are drawn to the antiques from Germany or France. More types of categories and things to think about. Maker of the dolls. You can think about display, like let's say you have room boxes or doll houses, or you just want to display on a shelf. You can do that. And then for modern dolls, there's ball jointed dolls. There are play dolls that are tiny. You have reproduction dolls, and you have artist dolls. So let's delve in. So doll makers, if you're looking at antique, now I'm not going to go into a lot of depth today on the antiques, as far as like when I can do a 3-hour seminar on the antique obelisk and old dolls, and we will look at how to identify them and ways to look and try to figure out who the makers are. So I'm not going to go really in depth on that tonight. It would be here for 3 hours and Karen would kill me. So we are going to just look more at an appreciation level at the dolls. But one thing to know about the tiny antique dolls is most of the antique doll makers for the miniatures, we don't know who made them. Most of them aren't marked. We've figured some of them out, but it is very hard when you have a German Albus doll, or you have a French mignonette. We can guess sometimes, but the vast majority of those dolls, we do not for sure know who the maker was. And looking at dolls by material is something I've been very interested in. I love finding dolls that are made from an unusual material that are tiny in size. Also, it can help with dating the dolls. China dolls came before bisque dolls, and that gave into stone bisque, and then that gave into plastic and celluloid. And so you can kind of do a timeline of dolls that is very interesting based on what the dolls are made of. So, oops, there we go. So wax dolls, the earliest dolls in my collection of tiny dolls are these wax dolls. And they were made basically the very end of the 1700s into the early 1800s. And these here in Turkish dress, there was a crazy craze for Turkish dress dolls in the late 1790s. And I had not identified these dolls for a very long time. I found them in a book of English dolls. And so I believe that they may have been wax crush figures, but they were in Turkish style dress. And so I believe these dolls are from the 1790s. And just looking at the details on these dolls, like one thing that fascinates me, and if you get into collecting small dolls, is the detail on the dolls. You can really tell a good doll by how much care is given to the clothing and to the features, etc. And these dolls here, they really had the detail. They had the metallic trim. They had the beautiful cape, bead eyes, and I almost lost these dolls. They were in a museum, Dolls by the Decades display, and I had lent the dolls. And there was power outage. And I remember this call from the museum. They're like, come get your wax dolls. It's like 110 degrees in here. So they didn't melt and I saved them. But, it's a danger with wax dolls. Then you have wooden dolls. And wooden dolls, I've got this little bar that I'm trying to, there we go. Wooden dolls are something, you had them in the English baby houses. So going back to the 1600s, there were, you can find examples. There's the little peg woodens, the Grodnatal dolls. This is a tiny wooden doll that I love. She's only 3 inches tall. And again, like she's got the pretty little lace on her, beautiful little features, unfortunately, a little paint loss to her face. But again, just think 3-inch tall wood doll. It's just, I just love the size of these. Paper mache, again, we're talking a little later than the wood dolls before we get to our China dolls. You can date them by the hairstyle. These were used in the baby houses and then the doll houses. And they're a lot harder to find than the bisque dollhouse dolls, but I do like to look for them. And just looking at some of the details on these dolls, like the details and the hairstyling, the molded hairstyles can help you date them if you're looking at that. And the majority of these dolls were made in the mid 1800s. And the bodies varied, stuffed leather, you had wood limbs, just really nice, tiny dolls. And most of the ones here are about 6 inches tall. And then you had your China head dollhouse dolls. And again, the dollhouses, you can get some really beautiful details in the hairstyles, coming closer later 1800s for most of these. Some of these are as old as the 1860s. I love this girl here with her beautiful hairstyle. Here are, oh gosh, I have a bar, which is lovely, but it keeps getting in the way of things. Okay, so here are these early China dolls. You can see all the way on the left, very early, about 1850s, what they call the Moshman style, which emulated the early Japanese dolls, and very hard to find with the cloth body jointing and bare feet. Going a little later, this you can tell is an early China doll because of the brushstrokes in the hair. It had cute flat boots. I believe that one is actually from Evelyn's book, so I've had it in my collection like a really long time. And over here, kind of in the 1860s, more with the flat boots. This is an old costume. I don't know if it was original to her, but again, with just a neat, the hairstyles emulated the hairstyles of the larger China dolls. And then here, this has got like an Adelina Patti kind of hairstyle, just really cool in the back, how much they did with that. A little later, she's got little heels on her boots, so she's probably about the 1870s, and she's redressed, but very prettily. And frozen Charlottes. You can find larger ones and they dress them, and by larger, I'm talking like 3 inches, maybe 5. You can find them and have them dressed for a dollhouse. The little tiny ones, which stand, gosh, under 1 inch tall, are fascinating, and they have so many uses. If you can still find them doll shows, they're not that expensive. You can use them as dolls for dolls, in room boxes, as babies in your dollhouse. And this is just a little study that I had done in frozen Charlottes, just showing all the different varieties. I mean, you could just collect frozen Charlottes if you were into them. Vast majority are under 6 inches tall, different kind of boots and painting, and some have molded caps. Some have slightly different shapes and modeling to the body. And these go, you're starting to get later, you're getting into the early 1900s here. Some are made of fine bisque, some are China, some are stone bisque. So the later ones, just be careful, the painting is not fired on and can be washed off. So to be careful if you start getting into those. Then other materials, interesting materials, cloth, leather, rubber. I'm always looking for something. So this is a very tiny, this little cloth doll stands less than 2 inches tall, and she was probably mid 20th century. I'm thinking maybe a Tyrolean, maybe made for the tourist market. And here, these ones are cloth dolls, and these were from the Shengshong mission in China, and they made these from the 20s into the 40s until the missions closed. And you can find, and they're all made by hand. They have the hand-painted faces on silk, different types of the clothing made from scraps, so you can find them in all different, I found like this guy with pants from that kind of cloth. So they vary greatly, and it's really fun to see the difference. There's always a family. I think it's almost always a family of 5, a mother, father, and then 3 children in these. And these are wonderful. These are made of pipe cleaners, and they're probably early 1940s, pre-war. They were made in Japan, not Nippon. They were not after the war, but these are 3 inches tall, and they have pets. So they've got little dogs on leashes, and they have baskets and bows in their hair. They have silk painted faces, hand painted. And, just think of it, pipe cleaners to get that much detail out of them. And they are marked made in Japan on the base of these dolls. Celluloid, again, now, we're moving in later, and I love celluloid. It's so hard to find them in good condition. But again, you can get great modeling. Look at this grandma here, probably late 20s, early 30s. She's got glasses and wrinkles in her forehead. And just a fascinating look at how the materials are changing for tiny dolls. And these are more, well, one's a plastic and one's a celluloid here. We've got our little plastic baby chef from the 40s to 60s. I'm thinking probably 50s, early 60s for him now that I've done a little research. And the little girl here, she's 4 inches tall, marked Germany. So we do know where she comes from. And then you've got the whole world of your mobiles. And so these are your one-piece dolls made mostly in Japan and Germany. They're usually marked. The one on the left was made in Germany. The one on right was made in Japan. And you get a whole host of colors, and they greatly, many of them really track the early bisque sets. And I think I have a couple of those to show you here as well. More celluloid, tiny dolls that were sold kind of in not supermarkets, but drugstores, etc. A whole collection of mid-20th century. This woman who was obsessed by tiny dolls, and her daughter told me she would take the supermarket money and she would save money with coupons, and then she would take the extra money and buy little dolls. And she saved them. She was going to do craft projects with them, but she saved almost all of them in the original packaging. And this is one of the dolls that she had saved, marked again in Japan, and that's the original package with the celluloid. They are holding a little, I don't know if you can see it, molded baby bottle in the hand. And just going into dollhouse dolls here. So dollhouse dolls that became more in keeping with scale really happened closer to the end of the 1800s. Earlier than that, if you look at baby houses, which are the old houses made in England and in Germany, the dolls were all over the place as far as size. They didn't really relate to the size of the items in the house. Now, the standard for dollhouse-sized dolls and everything in dollhouses is 1/12 scale, or 1 inch to a foot. So 1 inch to 12 inches. And you're starting to see that become the standard for dollhouse dolls. So this little guy in a Tyrolean costume was 1860s, 6 inches, more like a child. A man would be 6 inches tall. So you're starting to see closer to the scale we are used to today for dollhouses. And again, this girl is a little tall. I think she's actually 7 inches. So still a little taller than what we would consider scale for dollhouse dolls. But look at the curls modeled in the back of her head. And she's beautifully painted as well. And over here, again, look at the snood on this doll, 1870s. Now, she is at 5.5 inches. She'd be a 5'5" tall woman. So perfectly sized for the dollhouses of the late 1800s into the 1900s, 1870s most likely. She's got a boot with a small heel. I think she was also from Evelyn's collection. And I got her with a antique desk of roughly of the period for display. But I just love her snood and just her presence. And here again, here is a period dollhouse lady. So she's 5 foot tall. So she would be me in a dollhouse, 5 inches. And she's got hard to see up here, but a little molded ribbon painted in black on her hair. This is her original costume. And she's just a lovely lady. And she came, this is with her consort here. And the pig, I bought them all together. I don't know why there was a pig, but they've been together, must be their pet. And we'll take a little bit of a look here at him, because finding the smaller dollhouse dolls that are male with molded features are very difficult to find. There's a lot of male dollhouse dolls that are made dressed as, if you take off the wig and you change the hair, etc., you can make a doll that's in bisque or china into a male doll. But I look for the ones with molded features. I love this guy here on the left with his top hat and his mutton chop sideburns. And then these guys here, again, one with sideburns and one with a molded mustache. And also extremely hard to find are our Black dollhouse dolls. And again, here with the beautiful top hat molded, he's wonderful, very hard to find the early Black dollhouse dolls. And he is a great example. And here now we're getting into our 20th century dolls. Lots of bride and bridesmaid and bridegroom dolls you can find. This was actually a set that came together. And a lot of times they were used for the tops of cake. Just you can see sort of bridal, if you can find the original dolls with the original costuming, you can sort of see bridal costuming as it goes along in the early part of the century. And this is another set. This one's a little later. You can see it's got very Edwardian dress to the wedding gown. And they came together as a pair. And you can see painted eyes here. So glass eyes are a little more difficult and more expensive, those dolls, than they were at the time than painted. So as we're going on, not quite as fancy as the earlier dolls with their glass set eyes. And here you've got more early dollhouse dolls, early 1900s. So early 20th century, and here you're getting your molded hair, less detail to the hair. Again, a lot of painted eyes. The children here, these are all bisques, and they were often used as children for the dollhouses, and they're the right scale, basically. So I don't know if that was what they were made for, but that is what they are often used for. And here are some more of those. These two are in original dress. The doll on the right was on the cover of the Evelyn Ackerman book. I don't know, they're so charming and so tiny, This one here, her buttons are not exactly in scale, but she's got little buttons. This one's got her ruffle. They both have hats. Really, really charming. More of the same kind of all bisque dolls. To transition us over to take a little closer look at the all bisque dolls. So if you are an antique small doll collector, you fall into two categories: the dollhouse dolls and the all bisque dolls. And the all bisque dolls are so fascinating because of the modeling of the bodies and the shoes. And I can, like when I do my 3-hour seminar, we can spend a half an hour on shoes alone, because it can help you identify, it can help give you kind of the rarity of a doll. It can help you with the kind of artmanship, that's not a word, is it? The artistry that went into making the doll. And you can see, like, here's a very rare boot, the little brown boot with the little tiny buttons painted. And these are all painted onto the bisque. You can't wash them off. They were fired in just like the facial features were of these early dolls. I love this one, the multi-strapped boot. You've got your waffle socks there with the blue. So again, just if you get into more of the tiny all bisque dolls, vast majority, which are in the 3 to 6 inch range, you'll really get into the shoes and the boots of these dolls. So you've got your French all bisque, and they tended to be a little earlier, but not always, than the German, late 1800s. Again, we don't know who made the vast majority of these. Some we think are made by Schmidt and Fee, but we're not sure. And we have here the little guy in red who's so similar. It was definitely a German maker. And so it's something that is still being researched, really. The mignonettes, the small French dolls, were promoted by La Poupée Modèle. And so that's how they became popular. The little pocket dolls, they would be in the magazine. You would get patterns, so the little girls could sew for them. And you could sew from scraps, so it was very popular with the mothers as well. So here's one that is naked with bare feet, and the bare feet is pretty rare to find. Usually you'll find painted shoes, maybe Schmidt and Fee. The BTE mark is a little controversial, but it is marked. And I do like the little mignonettes that are marked with BTE. I think they are fascinating, and you can find a lot of little patterns for them because of La Poupée Modèle. Peg jointing also, and swivel neck on that. Here's a rarity with the bend elbows. It's sort of like she's trying to be a ball jointed doll, like getting into the spirit here. And very hard to find with any jointing on the knees or the elbows on these early all bisques are very rare. She's in her original clothing. And here's another one with bare feet. And this is the girl we saw in the first slide in her original presentation with her original clothing, around 1880, early pale bisque, just a beautiful girl. And she is one of like the prides of my collection. I just love her. And then you've got your German girls. Now, I also really love the German all bisque, especially the ones with the Kessner faces. They're just so beautifully painted. They've got a lot of character for a tiny doll. And so again, I'm not gonna spend a ton of time here, but generally they're chubbier, they're a little bit on the larger size. And we do know, although we don't always know who exactly made which doll, Simon and Halbig made them, Kessner made them, Altbeck and Gottschalk, Hertwig, etc. And many of these were made penny dolls. So a lot of these dolls were the kind of dolls where little girls would take their pennies and literally go to the store. They'd buy them nude to sew for them. And they were quite inexpensive. Not all. Some of these are a little fancier than that. So this one just had her arms jointed. Not sure the maker, perhaps Altbeck and Gottschalk, but I just love her presence, the look of beautifully painted eyes. And she's displayed with an early soft metal carriage and her baby there. This is another one. This one's what they call, does not have a jointed head. So she's a head torso all bisque. She has an original costume, also attributed to Altbeck and Gottschalk. She's got her glass eyes and just a really sweet, little bigger. She's 8 inches, but I do, because she's all bisque, I include her in my all bisque little girls. And here's another one. This one's a little later. Kessner, marked with mold 208 from about 1910. And then as you get later into the 20th century, you get a lot of dolls going for that penny price or the cheaper price for the little girls. And you're switching to German, almost all German, and then into Japan for the maker of these dolls. And a lot of, I don't want to say poorly, I want to say more economically painted bisque, sometimes the stone bisque where it will wash off. Your skin tones are starting to be baked into the doll as opposed to painted on or washed on, actually not painted on. And so this is kind of an example as we're getting further into the 1900s, how the quality is changing on the dolls. These ones are early to mid 20th century, and these are bisque that are not what's the word I'm looking, not fired in. And so it's a set of 5 all marked Japan, jointed, arms only, and they're just very charming though. And some of these Japanese dolls, when you can find them in original condition with the paint not washed off, are really quite nice. Here is a Kessner. I just love the painting of the face. I'm very partial to the Kessner German all bisques. She's got fancy striped shoes with different straps, and has her original wig about 6 inches tall for this little girl. And here is one, again, she's got all 5 joints, and she's got the boots we saw earlier. And so she's really fascinating. She's a very different head than a lot of the German dolls. So, hey, Kessner, again, attributed to at least from about 1885, and just her little round face. And then these we know are Simon and Halbig. They have the famous black stockings, and they have their mold number 890. And this is a little study I did. So you've got 2, 3, and 4 different size of the black stocking girls. So they go from 4 inches, 6 inches, and 7.5 inches. And again, this one is factory original, the one in the pink with the lace. And the rarities really quickly. The wrestler is a really popular one because the boots and the modeling and the chubby little face. So very popular with all bisque collectors, and she's from about 1885, and this one is marked. And then this is super rare. This is a kneeling all bisque, And most of these, they either broke or they didn't have a lot of play value. If you think about it, I mean, she's praying pretty much. And they're usually displayed with a bed. But a lot of them broke because I have trouble just keeping the doll's limbs from going like against itself. And so you don't see a lot of these dolls around. And this here, she's one of my favorites. She's got her original whale, and I display her without her clothes because I think the modeling on the body is just so lovely. And she has like just such lovely, lovely strapped boots. You've got not a lot of character dolls made in this size, but Gina Orsini is well known. She made a series of 4 different ones. And this one, I'm trying to blank on who this one is, but I think it says it on there. Can't see my whole thing. But this Mimi, I think, and there's also Vivi and Dee Dee and one other that I'm trying to blank on. But you can see there's just a lot more character and modeling to the face here. This was American Artist. And then also hard to find are your Black and Asian tiny dolls that are antique. So not all dolls, of course, in this size and this time period are all bisque. These here actually have composition bodies, and you can find tiny dolls with composition bodies. I'm not going heavily into small bébés and small dolly German dolls, but you can find them very rarely in the 6-inch and undersized, but under 12 inches, absolutely. And I'm going to do a program at the National Convention where we're going to talk about those a little more this summer. Molded features, so much fun to find. Molded hats. So you can, these here, the 3 down here are made in Japan. Again, 20th century, and of course, Kewpies. This guy here was Nippon marked, and I just love his very unusual little modeled hat. And this is one of my favorite. I've never seen her another one like her, but she is a Kessner maid, and she has molded little balls. She's ready to play. Jointed arms, so she does qualify as a doll, and jointed head, and just a very interested and rare Kessner. And the little, not just the bodice, but the little molded play suit on her is really cool. And then when you can find them, it's great to find original presentations. There's a couple of these here I want to share. This was the French mignonette. That's the top of the box, and that's everything that was inside. And these little robe dresses, if you're into sewing, they're not that hard to make. And so if you find the right trims and stuff, you can find patterns, and it's very much fun to sew for your mignonette-sized dolls, be they antiques or if they be modern reproductions or artist-made dolls. This one here is a German, and this is like I was talking about, they're not all bisque. This one has a composition body. She stands 8 inches tall, and she came with her own little trousseau in a little basket. And then here's tiny French mignonettes. These were found in these little sets, usually in folklore type costumes or costumes of the world, if you will, either regions of France or otherwise. And I'm saying 8 inch. That is not right. I think maybe it's 8 inches long. These dolls only stand about, I think, 2 inches or so. And then you can find, again, if you get into, you want to collect play dolls or you want to collect theater dolls, these were actually made in France for theater. They would have these little theater toys, and you could take these, and hard to find. And these aren't original costuming, but they were made to play with a theater. And display is something I like to talk about with miniature dolls because it's really fun. A large doll, so if you get a large doll, then if you want to give her, display with a desk or with a couch or with multiple accessories, it takes a lot of room, but you can really do some fun things with your tiny dolls. I love room boxes. I don't have room anymore in my house to have doll houses. And so I sold all my doll houses when I downsized. And but I still have some room boxes. And this here is from about 1860. It's the oldest room box in my collection. It's 2 rooms, as many of these room boxes are. And I don't know if I have a picture of it. This was before, after we moved and I hadn't put the stuff back in, but it's like a little art studio to the right on that one. Here's one. This is the more typical German type of room box that you find with one larger room and one smaller room to the side. This one's probably right at the beginning of the 1900s. And it's Christmas. There's a little tree and there's some little snow babies, I guess, as gifts. And it has dolls, actually came with the dolls in this room box. You got your dog, you've got your furniture from the period, you've got your little Ormulu light up here. It's really fun to, and you can find these boxes empty or make your own, and you can like fit them out for your dolls. So this is another one I have, and here they're just having a little parlor party. They've come to visit with the children, I guess. And again, it's furniture. The dolls are displayed kind of in the situation where you can really bring them to life. That shows you the little side rooms, which are set up often as little bedrooms for your dolls. And again, these are not my photos or my collection. Almost everything in here has been in my collection. But I had a couple of dollhouses and I don't have photos of those to share with you, unfortunately. But if you have room and you can outfit an entire dollhouse or baby house for your antique miniature dolls, or later, I mean, there are so many great dollhouses in the 20th century. You had your tin dollhouses, you know, there's so much furniture. You can really, whatever the time period you collect small dolls, you can do that. I do love furniture and accessories though, and these are just examples here of my dolls displayed with some of the appropriate time period furniture for them. And it really brings them to life in your shelf or your display. You can find on the left side is some German furniture, on the right side is some French furniture. You know, it's interesting. It's hard to find, you know, a lot of these they're not made of strong wood. These are soft woods. And so it was hard for them to make it to us today. Now here's going into more modern. I love to accessorize my small modern dolls. So, all right, Tiny Kitty, I'm cheating. She's 8 inches, not 6. And there's a little, little Coquette Sissy there, which is a Madame Alexander doll. But I love something called Remint for displaying with my later modern dolls. And Remint is a Japanese company, and they make all of these tiny miniatures. And they don't sell them in the US anymore unless you can find them on eBay, etc. They're made in Japan and mostly sold in Japan. They pulled out of the US market kind of in like the 2010-11 period when a lot of the doll industry was consolidating. But if you can find them, they're wonderful. So here I'm going to set up a little cafe for my Tiny Kitty dolls, and they're gonna have snacks. And I've got some coffee things. So I'm gonna kind of make it like a coffee shop. I have little art things. You can find tiny furniture for them. You have to watch the scale if you're going to get into Remit for your modern tiny dolls. They have several scales. They used to do most of their things in the very beginning in a Barbie play scale, which was like 1 inch to 6 inches. So larger than your dollhouse size, more of your Barbie house size. Then they started doing things closer to dollhouse size. And sometimes now they do furniture and things because they want to not just give you the miniatures, they're giving you the furniture as well. If you start seeing a bunch of furniture in the set, which we'll show you here, what like a whole set looks like. I have something better to show, but it's usually 1/24 inch, which is half again is small and is another dollhouse scale. So 1 inch equals 24 inches. And they'll give you like an entire room where you'll see a little bit of that. So, but what basically you get, you can buy an entire box, which is a whole set, and you get 8 boxes usually of miniatures in there. It's called a blind box. So many years ago when I had my doll store and I sold these, you could sell the individual boxes. It's like buying baseball cards. And so you would buy a box and you would know it's one of the sets, but you wouldn't know which set you were getting. And here's one set. Here it's like a whole set of Japanese. Here I can't say it right. I'm too late. Of your Girls' Day doll set. And so each box, when you were done collecting all the boxes, you would have the entire setup. And most collectors, I mean, you can buy an individual box easily on eBay if there's something you want. This is an example of how they're sold. This is one of the sets, which is 1 inch to 24 inches. So you can see it has furniture in it. It's got a tiny, wonderful little chess set and this little globe. That's probably not a globe. It's probably some kind of scientific instrument. And anyway, you can really do some fun things displaying your modern dolls with remint stuff. Here's an example of what comes in just one of the 8 boxes. I'm really into the Snoopy remint. I'm really into Snoopy. It's a long story. So I love these. And in this one little box, you get the little, what do they call those? Viewmaster. The little Viewmaster, you've got some snacks, you've got a little tiny mug and a tray and some food goodies. And here, this other one here, you're getting 2 pieces of furniture and a key and a little diary. Just kind of doing a couple more of our 20th century smaller dolls. I have all these Kewpies and I don't collect Kewpies, but if you collect tiny dolls, it's very hard not to end up with some Kewpies in your collection. They're charming, they're not that expensive, and you can get a lot of molded accessories with them. In the back of this cabinet, I have some of my Baps dolls, and I apologize, I was going to get some Baps slides in here. They're another wonderful cloth 20th century doll that is wonderful. I'm also really into Japanese dolls, and it's hard, I'm having trouble moving this bar. But anyway, so here is, oh God, I love Japanese dolls, and I look for the tiny, here, these Gosho Niños are about, I think the big one's like 4 inches tall. These are tiny Girls' Day set, 3 dolls. I displaying them with a little Japanese screen. I think the tallest one here is maybe like 5 inches. And then here, these are, hold on, let me see if I can move this. There we go. These are the Shops of Edo, which is an interesting story. My eye always goes to little. Years ago, I took one of Alan Scott Pate's Japanese tours, and most of what we were looking at, of course, was larger dolls, but I had my eye on the lookout for smaller dolls. And so we were in this museum outside of Kyoto, no English in the museum whatsoever, and everyone's looking at these. And I did look at the gorgeous large antique dolls, but down at the last shelf in the museum were rows and rows of these tiny little shops, and it was fascinating and so detailed. And I grab Alan, I'm like, Alan, what are these? He's like, I have no idea. And so, and also could not be explained by the curator of the museum. He was just like, well, they're old, like basically. I'm like, oh, great. So it took me a while. And like 2 years later on eBay, I found a lady whose husband had been in the military and had brought these back for her. And they're called the Shops of Edo. And they make plastic versions today. And they make kits where you can even make your own. And these are all basically from the 30s and 40s. And they are really tiny. Most of them are about 4 inches tall, 3 to 4 inches tall. And so that's how detailed they are. So can I go backwards? Let me see. Now I'm going forwards. Hold on. Well, anyway, they're really, really detailed. They're tiny, 3 inches by 4 inches. Oh, this was a pottery shop. The one prior was let's see, can I go previous? There we go. It was an umbrella shop. I mean, the detail on these, and I have these tiny little Japanese dolls I got, the Huguette Clark collection that I'm displaying with them, and it's just beautiful. But it took me a really long time to pin down what those little tiny shops were, and I'm really always on the lookout for them. Then I also have a Japanese theater that I got, Huguette Clark, which we won't go into, I don't want to keep you guys all night, was a collector of dolls. She was very rich. There's a book on it, and she had some auctions with therialts. And she loved Japanese dolls and had a lot of things commissioned. And so I went to the uncatalogued auction and was able to pick up some of these tiny Japanese dolls made for this theater, which I also was able to get. My daughter, for those of you who don't know, lives in Japan full time, is fluent, and she works for the Japanese theater. And so I really, really wanted this in my collection. The dolls here are about, I think, like 2 inches, 2.5 inches tall. And the entire theater fits in one of my shelves in my doll room. And that's my doll room. I've got my large dolls on the left and my little dolls on the right. And my doll, I had this made so the shelves are not as deep for the tiny dolls. And different ways of displaying a lawyer's case can work really well. So to the left there shows you the many antique dolls in a lawyer's case. To the right, I'm showing you just like the difference in size from my large dolls to my tiny dolls and how they're displayed. And I'm always working on the displays, trying to bring in furniture. And I love this setup with, you've got your, they're out going for a ride with the horse, and you can do wonderful things like this. You don't need a ton of space like you would for the larger dolls. And then a lot of the little dolls from the mid-20th century, as I was telling you about earlier, came from this just fascinating collection from this woman who bought them all and saved them. And you wouldn't get a lot of these dolls saved in the original packaging, except this was her thing. And she just put them away and she'd save her money. And I was really happy for research and various purposes to be able to acquire this collection from the daughter of the original owner. This was from that. Her collection went from the 20s to the early 50s. A lot of these little all bisque sets from Japan are just fascinating. You will get them. Here's one where they're holding the dolls, and the clothing matches the pictures on the front of the box. And here's just various ones here. I think these might have been sort of international costumes. Again, we're not going to talk about small babies and French and German dolls tonight, but I will be talking about that at convention if you come to my program. Modern reproduction dolls are wonderful. There are people such as Kathy Hansen who have done amazing jobs with these type of dolls. Be careful. There are fakes and frauds out there if you're going for the older bisque. But there are great artist-made dolls. There are great Sealy reproductions that are properly marked. And if you're on a budget and you're really interested in collecting and maybe sewing for some of these dolls, it's a great way to go. And I have a lot of Kathy Hansen dolls in my collection. I have a lot of fabulous tiny dolls from the UFDC conventions. You can get them, from your artists in the sales room, as well as a lot of the luncheons, workshop. The one on the right here was a Susan Circus workshop where we made the dress and put the box together. The one on the left, and I'm not sure if it's coming up the same way on your screen, left hand, is we got this wonderful little tiny set of accoutrements at a luncheon. There's a little UFDC doll. This one here from 2002, Judy Voorhees made this, and the doll is 6 inches. We got the whole thing, the egg and all the little accessories, a little Viewmaster-ish thing down there. And I just love, again, I'm into accessories and tiny, and I love when a doll can be displayed like this with her belongings. Such a big fan. I'm such a big fan of Kathy's dolls, and I knew her sister Corky, who made tiny little accessories for these dolls. Absolutely beautiful. Again, patterns are available. You can sew for them. You can play with them. Here I'm putting together a like a trunk set for them. Again, not going to talk about it today, but bathing beauties and half dolls or tiny dolls that display very well if you get into smaller dolls. Also, knotters are fascinating. I do a lot on that in my seminar. They're very defined set of dolls from the 1920s and 30s, and they fit really well into a tiny doll collection. We're not talking about sewing tonight, other than it's interesting. If you take a concept such as Victorian ribbon work and miniaturize it down, which is something that I had done, and just if you look for the right patterns, sizes, keeping things into scale is the big thing if you get into sewing for small dolls of any era and finding the right tiny trims and stuff. I really love tiny ball jointed dolls. And these here were made by, oh, I'm going to go back, hold on. These here were made by Rain Man, and they're from Elf Dolls, and absolutely so tiny, so much jointing and detail in these. You can change the eyes if you want to. Just really gorgeous. She stands, I think, about 5 inches, maybe 6 inches tall. I think it's 5. And this is another one of their dolls, and just beautiful. These are flower fairies. They came in different skin tones. The heads come off so you can change the eyes, as with most ball jointed dolls. Again, they're just really beautifully made. And they're wonderful for photography. Someone was talking about photography earlier, and you can really set up beautiful backgrounds, etc., for these tiny dolls. Another UFDC tiny doll, which is from the Nashville Convention, so not that long ago, from 2019. This is Melody Bright, and it's a Judy Porter doll, and ball jointed, multiple joints, came with all these cute little accessories and things. And she was like, I think a limited edition of only 60. It was like a small luncheon. So, keep your eyes out. I mean, I think, a lot of times, because it's so expensive to hand make these dolls, you end up with tinier dolls at convention, which, is perfectly fine and fine, because I do love to collect them. And that's it. Just looking at so many other things. You can get tiny American Girl dolls. Of course, you have entire groups of dolls like Dawn dolls from the late 60s, early 70s, and your Ginny dolls, etc., that are tiny dolls in their own right. These here, dollhouse dolls from Heidi Ott. So if you have a modern dollhouse dolls are available. These here, you've got a little Helen Kish. Over here, tiny Riley, and over here you have a oh gosh, I'm drawing a total blank because I'm so tired. Kathy Cruz has a great line of dollhouse size dolls in miniature that are relatively recent. And that's kind of it. I've got library suggestions if people are interested. Dolls in miniature is great. If you're interested in the older dolls, all bisque and half bisque dolls can teach you so much about construction and really get into like the nitty gritty of the dolls and what they look like. A lot of the old catalogs, you can find catalogs which specialize in tiny dolls from Theriault and other auction houses. A lot of books from Sealy over here. This wonderful book about the mignonette is fantastic. Highly recommended if you're into that doll. Rooms and room boxes. This is a great old catalog for that. And that's kind of it. So thank you guys. I hope I didn't talk too long and bore the heck out of you. So I'm going to turn myself off and get back to the regular screen. So again, thanks for joining me. I hope